Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Profit Minds podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Stephen Kirch, creator of the Profit Minds Growth System, a unique blend of profit growth, productivity acceleration, and building robust business process for scale. In every episode, I interview entrepreneurs and small business owners from around the world with a unique story to tell. You can find the show on YouTube, LinkedIn, Apple and Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, and more. Well, hello, everyone. Today, I'm really happy to invite back my guest, Chloé Nwangwu, Director of NobiWorks, aka the Brand Scientist. And today, we're going to talk about how to reach your visibility tipping point. Welcome, Chloé.
Thanks for having me.
So I won't ask you to give your entire story, because if people want to hear that, they should go back and watch the other episode, which was fantastic, right? That's why I have you back on. So excited about this. But we touched on a topic last time, which I think is really important for all different kinds of small business owners to understand. We talked a little bit about the invisibility tax and talking about how to reach your visibility tipping point. How do you make it so that you're really accelerating your visibility in the marketplace? So talk to us about what do you mean by the visibility tipping point?
Yeah. So that's a great question. So first, I'll give a definition, right, to sort of anchor us, and then I'll give some examples so that it's a little bit more clear, right? So your visibility tipping point is the point at which the effort that you're putting into being visible is far outweighed by the results that you're reaping from that investment of time, energy, resources, etc., right?
You get more back than you put in.
Precisely. That's exactly right. And more technically, it's the point at which people who've yet to recognize a particular person or idea or brand, let's say, begin to kind of find it difficult to coordinate with other people around them or in their circle. So that's generally, like, more specifically what it means. But the first definition I gave is sort of like what it feels like, what you're sort of aiming for. Now, all of that can kind of be abstract, to be fair. So I can give an example of a client that I'm actually currently working with, right? And this client has done pretty much all of the things, right? They wrote an award-winning book. They did the TED Talk. In fact, they did multiple TED Talks. They hired a sales team to bring in leads for their business, right? They put in all of this effort, literally wrote the book on their topic, and they have PhD, so they did the research on the topic too, right? Like all the things. And the return on that investment is biz development is still hard for them.
Wow.
Still a struggle. Yeah. And so what this person came to me for, even though these were not the words that they had, they were coming to me because they were looking to reach their visibility tipping point, right? They were looking to sort of reverse that current so that rather than trying to gain traction, right, they wanted to be in a place where they were more managing the momentum that they had built, right? And investing in such a way that they knew the output or the outcome would be worth it. So yeah, that's a visibility tipping point.
So what were they doing wrong, and what are you doing differently to how is it that businesses don't achieve this, right? What are the maybe we should start with what are the barriers, and then what are some of the things that people try to do that don't work?
Yeah, absolutely. Also,
and then we can go to the solution space.
Yeah, totally. So there are a lot of things, I'll be honest, there are a lot of things that contribute to this sort of spinning of wheels place. And I'll say that one of the most common ones, or one of the reasons that people come to me, is the invisibility tax, right? And that's the sort of what we touched upon a little bit last time while we were here, right? Um, and the invisibility tax, for those who are unfamiliar or have not yet seen that episode, it's essentially the extra bit of time, energy, resources, etc., that folks who are under-recognized are made to pay by society in order to be as visible as their peers, and sometimes to be visible at all, right? So that's the invisibility tax. And a great example of the invisibility tax, you know what, actually, yeah, I'll have folks imagine with me a scenario, okay? So, imagine with me, um, imagine with me a parent, okay? Imagine with me a parent, and they are making lunch for their rambunctious kids. Now, chances are the parent you imagined was a woman, a mother, right? But what I want you to do now instead is to imagine that this parent was a man, was a father, right? In this scenario, what do you think the collective societal response to that image would be? Generally, very positive, right? Lots of acclaim, lots of like, you know what? Yes, we love this. Oh, he's such a good dad. Look at how he cares for the kids, right? All of this stuff, right? Now, if you go back and imagine that it is a woman, in fact, right? The reaction is a little less exciting, right? The reaction is sort of like, oh, okay,
That's what she's supposed to do.
what she's supposed to do, right? Now, the reason that I bring this up is because this disparity sort of in treatment is a really excellent illustration of the invisibility tax, or a facet of the invisibility tax. I specifically call this facet the reciprocity ransom. And what is happening here, right, is that the woman or the mother in this situation needs to pay, maybe I'll say, an extra bit of time or energy in order to activate a willingness to reciprocate from those around them, or to even activate goodwill, right? That's what's happening. There's a higher threshold that this person needs to meet in order to make those things happen than the father in this case, right? And this sort of flies in the face of this really underlying principle that exists in a lot of business literature that we understand today, and that's the reciprocity rule, right? When you do something for someone, they want to do something for you in return, right? It's why lots of folks will hear, oh, just give value for free. And then folks will feel kind of obligated to give stuff in return, right? That's where that comes from. And what the reciprocity ransom shows us is that if you are an under-recognized person, if you are someone who is paying the invisibility tax, then give value for free is not actually a winning strategy, right? But that is something that folks will be doing as they are attempting to become more visible for the purposes of biz development or whatever it happens to be for them, right?
Let me make sure I understand. What you're suggesting here is that people who are under recognized for whatever role it is that they're playing, right? Whatever
Mhm.
role it is that they're in, um, because they're somehow less valued in that specific role
Mhm.
than somebody else that would be in that role, that giving away what they do has less value than it would if it came from someone who was intrinsically more valued by society, or not intrinsically, but
Yes.
extrinsically.
Yes, yes, that's exactly right, right? That
Okay.
there is a sort of reciprocity food chain, right? And if you are at the bottom of this reciprocity food chain, that means you can often be expected to give more and get less in return. And that often looks like, pouring your blood, sweat, and tears into giving value for free, for example. That is a very common culprit. And then not really getting dividends on that particular investment.
Interesting. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So that's one. Are there other things that people in this category of the paying an invisibility tax? Are there other things that they do that is sort of works for, I'll say, normal people, or the the language here is really hard, right? It works for whatever the society thinks is the valued member versus the undervalued member. Other things that they're encouraged to do that aren't working.
Yeah, that's a really good question. The answer to that is yes. Let me think of some examples. Well, we did talk about one of the examples last time, which is the whole ideal client avatar thing. And so, folks, if you haven't seen that episode, go back and then listen to that, because that is another tactic that it just from an efficacy standpoint is problematic, but then also if you are under recognized is especially less effective for you. So that's another example.
And the problem is, again, the assumption that this specific avatar is the best avatar for you to go after, as opposed to someone who you should look broader. You should look for people in a maybe special place or special frame of mind, or right.
So that's a huge part of it, right? That often when we are using an ideal client avatar, we are deciding who it is that we are going to focus on, right? But if you've already been conditioned to overlook certain kinds of people, then certain kinds of people are not going to become folks that you focus on, right? And so from an ethics standpoint, right, there's the issue of, you're making assumptions about a person based off of their, their gender or their race or their age or whatever it happens to be, right? That whatever an ideal client avatar has, right? And those are assumptions that you generally wouldn't want to make, or they're too big, the too big leaps in logic to make, right?
Or too confining.
Yes, exactly, right? And so I it's so easy to get drawn into that particular. And we did a whole episode on it, so I want to make sure.
So let's talk about now. What are some of the things that you can do to overcome those barriers and to get past to the tipping point?
Yeah. Also a good question. So what I will say is, and this is going to be a frustrating answer, but hear me out, give me some rope.
Okay.
And the answer is, it depends.
Of course.
Yeah. It depends. And very specifically, when I say it depends, what you should do, or how you should get to your visibility tipping point, or circumnavigate some of these barriers that we're talking about in order to get to said tipping point, will depend on what phase of visibility you're in and how effectively you are navigating that particular phase of visibility.
So say more about the phases of visibility, because I'm guessing the listeners don't know what you mean when you say that.
Look, there's a reason for that. It's because I uncovered them. So so I, through my research, have sort of, I would say, identified maybe 5 phases of visibility. And each of these phases of visibility have their own barriers, they have their own difficulties, they have their own structural things that you need to be focused on, that you need to take care of. before you can even consider moving on to the next phase of visibility,
Okay,
right?
great.
But the goal is, in fact, to move through these phases of visibility. And so often what will happen is folks, A, won't be aware of these phases of visibility, right? And so B, what they'll tend to do is they'll try to do a lot of the right things, right? So that means, that client that I was talking about before, they did a couple of TED Talks, they wrote an award-winning book, right? Those things aren't bad things, right? Like they're
Right.
not necessarily the wrong things to do, but it is entirely possible to do the right things at the wrong times. And so what you want to make sure that you are participating in activities that are relevant to the phase of visibility that you are in. And if I can spoil even further, that are also relevant to the level of development that you're at within that particular phase of visibility. And so for example, if you are stuck in the first phase of visibility, right? Then chances are really high that you're struggling to get people to understand you in such a way that they're galvanized to action, right?
Yeah.
That's generally what that looks like, right? And so the actions that you would take in order to fix that look a certain way. However, if you're stuck in, let's say, the third phase of visibility, right? Then chances are high that you're struggling to manage the momentum that you've been building. And in both scenarios, you are trying to get noticed by the right people in the right ways, but your approaches are going to look different. Now, let me get a little more specific actually about like what
Okay.
things might look like. Yeah, let's do that. Let's get a little bit more specific. So generally, the kinds of projects or things that you want to do, I would say fall into three camps. The first camp I would say is working on your platform. All right. And all your platform is your premise about how the world can and should be different. And it's your positioning, right? What makes that premise distinct? So when you take those two things together and you take all of your memorable assets, you have your platform, right? So working on your platform means that you are essentially establishing an obvious reason for people to pick you, right? At the end of the day, that's what you're doing, right?
Okay.
And so if you are in the first phase of visibility and you're struggling, right? Working on your platform is going to look a certain way, right? If you're in the third phase of visibility, right? Working on your platform is going to look a different way, right? So you can kind of see how it would look different, even though you're working ostensibly on the same concept.
Same asset. Yeah.
Same asset, exactly, right? The second group, I would say, is what I call your circle of recognition. And your circle of recognition, it's just fancy talk for your network, sure, right? But it is your network structured around a very specific behavior, namely recognition, right? And so when you're working on your circle of recognition, air quotes, right? What that means is ensuring that that network is designed to amplify your ideas in the right kinds of ways. Generally, there's like, if I'm going to go black and white thinking here, there are like two kinds of ways that you can amplify your ideas, right? There's the information sharing kind of way where, you're sharing, it's the news, right? Or this is a hilarious cat meme, right? Information sharing, right? And then there is amplifying your ideas in a behavior changing sort of way, right? We want the latter. So we want it to be the case that when your ideas are amplified, they're amplified in such a way that they change the behavior of those around you, of those in said network, and that they continue to change the behavior as that network or as that circle of recognition expands. And in order to facilitate that, your circle of recognition has to be designed to make that happen. And when I say designed, I mean that literally. I mean that literally. You look at the literal geometric shapes of the human relationships required to build a network, right? When you look at those shapes, certain shapes lead to certain outcomes. So the shape that is generally understood to look kind of like a firework or like a spoken wheel, right? Where we have sort of one point in the middle and it's connected to a whole bunch of points sort of on the outside, right?
Yeah.
That sort of shape, that's really great for information sharing. Excellent for the spread of information, right? But if you're looking to spread behavior change, right? Especially a complex kind of behavior change, anything that has any kind of risk or requires someone to do something that's beyond the status quo, right? That network shape can't facilitate that.
Yeah, okay.
Structurally cannot facilitate that, right? And so you need a different network shape. The research is showing that the network shape required for that often looks kind of like a fishnet, right? And so that's the structure that you want. And so when we're talking about working on your circle of recognition, it's a few things, right? It's making sure that you have the stakeholders that you need in that circle, right? And then it's also making sure that they are connected to each other in a way that will bring out the outcomes that you need. So that's
it's interesting.
2.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let me just reflect that back to make sure I've got it right. So
Yeah.
so early on, right, when you're trying to get visibility, I don't know that I know exactly which stage is what, but early on, you're trying to mostly disseminate information about what it is that you do.
Yeah.
Right. And then you're the center of that, with spokes going out to all of the people you're trying to impact. Right.
Yes.
If you move to another phase where you're trying to, let's say, build referral partners, right?
Yeah.
That is not to spokes, but you have to equip the people in the first tier, right? Your referral partners, with enough information that they can then spread from there, and they can spread multidimensionally, right?
Yes.
So
Yes.
it requires a different level of engagement. We were talking about this in one of the coaching communities that I'm in, where, going out to get referral partners, you can't just go to somebody and say, hey, I want you to be my referral partner.
Exactly.
You really have to get them in an understanding of what it is that you do.
Yes, that's exactly right.
And maybe even take them through a piece of your program or a piece of, so that they really get it.
Yeah.
And now they're able to understand not only how you can help because you helped them, but how you could, and how to look for people other people you could help.
Yes, that's correct. That's correct.
Right.
And so what you are pointing out here, right, is the fact that as you traverse the various phases of visibility, your network needs also change. And so that means the shape of your network, the optimal shape of your network, also changes. So yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And so many things I could say about this. So many things. I'm sure there are people who are listening who are screaming questions, but I do want to close the loop before I do that. And so I will say the third group of sort of projects or things, right, that folks can do to work their way through the various phases of visibility is working on what I call your attention management system, right? And all that is essentially saying, okay, cool. There are various stakeholders that are going to be required for your success, right? And now we need to be able to gain, maintain, and translate their attention predictably. And that is going to look different depending on which of those stakeholders we're talking about, because those stakeholders have different motivations, right? And so you need to actually have the infrastructure in place to gain, maintain, and translate the attention of each of those types of stakeholders. So
let's bring it back around to the visibility tipping point. At what point in the visibility spectrum, right? Where do you have to get to, and what does that look like when you're to the tipping point or past the tipping point? What does that look like?
Yeah. So the point is a little different for everybody, but it is almost always happening between the third and fourth phases of visibility. And I'm trying to decide, would it be helpful for me to just say what the phases of visibility are, or would that just open a whole other can of worms?
It probably does, but let's name them at least, and then say this is the crossover point.
Yeah.
And how it feels or looks. Right?
Yeah. Okay. So the first phase of visibility is long-term memory. Okay. You are trying to gain access to long-term memory, and that has its own particular barriers, right? The second phase of visibility, visible stages, right? This is where you're trying to get on visible stages, right? The third phase of visibility, collective memory. Okay. And so this is kind of a crossing the Rubicon moment, right? Where your reputation begins to precede you a little bit at this point, right? And groups of people, not just individuals, groups of people begin to have the same sorts of ideas about you and your work, right?
You'll come up in a conversation and somebody else will say, "Oh yeah, I've heard that about this person." Right.
Precisely.
So the third person who hasn't heard hears it from two other people sort of simultaneously.
Yes.
Is that okay?
Yes,
good.
that's a pretty accurate. Yes, exactly. The fourth phase of visibility I call the halls of recognition. And so this is where, this is where folks are inviting you to, everyone knows what the halls of recognition happen to be in their industry, right? It's the Harvard Business Reviews, it's the South by Southwest, it's the, whatever it happens to be, right? These are the halls of recognition, and you are being actively invited into those places because you confer certain qualities to them that they find attractive, right? The halls of recognition. And then the fifth and final phase of visibility, I just kind of call it the rooms where it happens, right? And so this is where decisions are being made about what's happening in your corner of the world, whether or not that's your industry or something else, right? So these are the 5 phases.
Okay.
And the visibility tipping point tends to happen between the collective memory phase and the halls of recognition phase, like somewhere in that group. For some folks, it might be happening once they're fully in the halls of recognition phase. For some folks, it's while they're still in the collective memory phase. For some folks, it's as they're transitioning, right? But it's somewhere in that segment there that one reaches their visibility tipping point. Yeah. Other questions?
And so at that point, it seems like all you have to do once you get to that point, and of course, we could probably have another conversation about how you move through from one to the next, but it seems like all you have to do now is sort of prime the pump, because you've got a whole bunch of people who are already talking about you.
Yes.
And if you want to enter into that, or you want to remind them periodically to continue to have that conversation, so that you remain in that collective, in that collective memory. And one of those people is likely to be in a position to invite you to be part of the halls of memory. or the
Yeah, halls of recognition. Yeah.
halls of recognition, right?
Yes,
So,
exactly right. That's
right. So
exactly right. That
that's how you wind up tipping over the.
yes.
Does that make sense? Have I got it?
Yes. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Like you're essentially, and that's why I'm saying that it's usually somewhere in this sector, but it depends, right?
That
Because
makes sense. Yeah.
you basically, with the collective memory, you reach a sort of critical mass, and then your work and your ideas start spreading themselves
Right.
almost. Like that's what structurally ends up happening.
Yeah.
So
Got it.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if people want to learn more about this,
Yeah.
what's the best way to get in touch with you, to reach out? Again,
Yeah. So I actually have a resource on this that walks you through in detail the phases of visibility, the various levels of development within them, how you navigate your way through them, all of those things. It's called The Art and Science of Amplifying World-Changing Ideas. And let's link it in the show notes so folks
okay.
can have access to that and watch it. And it will probably answer every question that you have now about everything I've said so far.
All right. And if not, what's the best way for people to reach out?
If not, the best way to reach out to me, I am on LinkedIn under my name. So absolutely feel free to reach out via LinkedIn. I am also on Instagram. Feel free to reach out there, though I'm less often there. So that, just full disclosure. And honestly, email me when if you sign up for that resource, you will be getting access to it via email. You reply to that email with questions, it will come directly to me and I will answer them.
Wonderful.
So yeah.
All right. Thanks so much. And that concludes our show for today. Thanks again to my guest, Chloé Nwangwu, the director of NobiWorks, and also known as the brand scientist. I hope you learned something about how to reach your visibility tipping point. I know I did. Thanks for listening. You've been listening to the Profit Minds podcast. This is your host, Dr. Stephen Kirch. Please visit www.profitminds.net for other episodes or to contact me. Thank you for your positive feedback, comments, questions, and for sharing this show with others. Thanks for listening. Have a grateful day.